Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. Zechariah 9, Judgment on Israel's Enemies. Before I begin, I'd like to point out that these Old Testament books are key. They're basically more telling about the Christian argument in regards to God's nature and what he's mad about and how to get to heaven than the New Testament is. Because they elaborate on the situation where Jesus just kind of gives speeches in the New Testament. There's Acts, which is basically just following the apostles and the disciples' movements, into Europe and the nations that are very kind of Western minded at the time. Okay? And they don't really tell you, about God's true nature. And Jesus speaks in a way that's coded, and you need the Old Testament to decode it. And a lot of Christian preachers tell you don't look into the Old Testament, because if you do, you come to the conclusion that God is a warrior, not like a nerd, and that the spirit in your church couldn't possibly be God's spirit. For example, Zechariah 9, Judgment on Israel's Enemies. A prophecy. The word of the Lord is against the land of Hadrach, and will come to rest on Damascus, for the eyes of all people and all the tribes of Israel are on the Lord. And on Hamath too, which borders on it, and on Tyre and Sidon. Therefore they are very skillful. Tyre has built herself a stronghold. She has heaped up silver like dust, and gold like the dirt in the streets. So notice, there's another connection. Usually when they compare it to something, it's connected to the other things. Basically always is in one way or another, right? So when they compared silver to the dust, right, it says she has heaped up silver like dust. Okay, I'm being fumed, so my reading's a little off, but bear with me. They're saying that when people return to the dust, they return to some kind of primitive beast state, right? A beast goes after material things, right? Food and shelter and humping, right? Gold to get gold diggers, silver to get gold diggers, what have you. Okay, silver also stands for different things in Proverbs. For example, the tongue of the righteous is choice silver. Okay, the actions of the righteous. So it gets confusing with the different interpretations. But one way to interpret this is that Tyre, has actually, stored up the actions of the righteous. Okay, like dust. Okay, so she stored up something for herself. Tyre as a place, and as a spirit of a people that's worth having. So it gets confusing. However, and then there's two interpretations, right? The people return to something worth having, the treasures in heaven, and the people who are doing the wrong thing return to the dust, right? They go to hell. They're just mere earthlings that, live a pathetic worm-like life, and then go to hell. And then it will talk about how serpents lick the dust, serpents eat the dust. And then they call, Jacob a worm, and a worm is the archaic word for a snake. Okay, so they say the spirit of the Jews who remain and those who align themselves to it, and we see that going on today with the globalists, they will devour the life essence of the people here and bring them down to hell with them. Okay, but it's more than them that is the people's problem. The people's worst enemy is themselves, because they refuse to do what's right, they refuse to stop breeding, etc., etc. Okay. But the Lord will take away her possessions and destroy her power on the sea, and she will be consumed by fire. Ashkelon will see it in fear, Gaza will writhe in agony, and Ekron too. For hope will wither, Gaza will lose her king, and Ashkelon will be deserted. So when they lose their king, okay, so the sons of God, can be seen as leaders of nations, but Lucifer, the devil, in a sense, is a son of God. So the sons of God who fell off, you see what I'm saying? They're not really, it's not a title that's honorable in every instance. Okay, so they're not the son of God. There's one son of God, and there's a bunch of people that failed to rally and obey God through me, right? To obey God through the top martial arts. I'm the last valid top martial arts ever, the top martial arts there ever was. Okay, so they're going to lose their place in the heavens, right, is what it's saying, and they're going to lose anything worth having. So you say, well, they already lost their place in the heavens because they didn't make a covenant with God. Well, yeah, yes and no. Because if we look at the Bible, we see that the king of Babylon is empowered by God at one point. The king of Assyria Okay, even though they're not Jews, right? God is helping them conquer. So it gets complicated what exactly they're saying and what they're not saying. The simplest way to look at this is that the devil, in a sense, is allowed to go on the rampage, okay, as long as he maintains the boundaries of the Lord. Okay, here in the end, the devil does not maintain the boundaries of the Lord. That's why in Revelation, the devil and the beasts are thrown into the lake of fire, you know, along with their spirits, along with all the rebels of the world. Okay, so it gets a bit complicated. It's part of why I don't like the Bible, because it's made, you see how I have to take all this time explaining it instead of pointing right to it and say, this is what it's saying plainly, and that's why you should rally to me. Instead, I have to kind of decipher a lot of things. Okay, there was things that gave away that you should rally to me, like Proverbs 16:12, Isaiah 28:17, Exodus 15:3, so on and so forth. But for some people, that's not enough. So, you know, for good measure, and it's really an unnecessary overkill, I go through some of these books in the Bible and show you how the prophets are pointing right to me. Anyway, so again, it says Gaza will lose her king and Ashkelon will be deserted. So having a king is important. Who's the king of of America, of the whites, of the Jews, of the black community? Who are their kings, right? They don't have any celebrities or leaders or martial artists of note. No one else does. It's just me. So they lost their kings, and this is one way we can use that as a formula to see who's being punished by God and who's not. And it's also exactly why did they lose their king? Were they all doing the right thing, and everyone in the world teamed up against them and cost them their king? You know, like, you know, etc., etc., right? You know, who, what, when, where, how, why. 7. I will take the blood from their mouths, the forbidden food from between her teeth. Those who are left will belong to our God and become a clan in Judah, and Ekron will be like the Jebusites. So now you see how, you know, some of these people had things worth having, right? They had silver stored up, you know what I'm saying, and gold, like dirt in the streets, right? So they had silver and gold, things that can be seen as having spiritual value. Let me give you an example. When the Bible says, you know, an attractive woman who rejects good sense is like a gold ring in a pig's snout. That gold is her physical beauty, which is somewhat of a blessing from God. So that's another thing we can look at, is that these groups have stored up, you know, attractive women. And those attractive women and those men who are good at fighting will, you know, they're saying they will become part of the clan of Judah. Okay? But I will encamp at my temple to guard it against marauding forces. Never again will an oppressor overrun my people, for now I am keeping watch. Okay, so notice, you know, they've interfered with this video, and you know, try to make it, they want to make it seem like I don't know what I'm talking about, right, which is fucking retarded. You see what I'm saying? And that's why more punishments have to come. Those of you who follow my videos, certainly the government has been watching, they know that I said I need a suitable helper because they're making it harder for me to speak. And it's easier for me to talk to a female about this before, because they usually put the emphasis on confounding my speech at an important moment. If I'm trying to talk about something important with my brothers, or if I'm, you know, I'm making a video, they make it harder for me to speak. And there's a bunch of crazy people in mental health that have a long history for sexually abusing their patients and little kids and so on and so forth, who sell out to the highest bidder, who want on record during MK Ultra, you know, the who's who of mental health worked with the CIA, you know, countless doctors worked for the CIA, we can go on, you know, psychologists are just, you know, sex cult scum these days, you know what I'm saying? Think about it. You know, Freud and Jung were two gay guys who were arguing that they wanted to have sex with their mom, basically, you know, with Freud being the main one making the argument, the other guy saying that's fascinating, and they had all kinds of perverted, sick habits, and they wanted to create a psychological construct in society where people did sexually immoral things. So he said that, you know, mental illness, he said the root cause of mental illness was unfulfilled sexual desire. Well, what is a sexual desire? Is it just heterosexual between a man and his wife? No. They wanted people to sleep around and be gay and so on and so forth. And they're part of the greater Greco-Roman, you know, orgy kind of behind the scenes social club, you know, network. You could tell by the way they thought, by the way they dressed, it all, you know, textbook. All right. So again, because of the interference with and everything else that's been going on, more judgments go out against people and their offspring. Now remember, these are people with no intention to repent. When the most righteous person in the world is saying, hey, and he's the smartest person ever lived, you know, in terms of brain power, sense, insight, he's saying you're going to be punished, and you and your offspring. Okay? You can see yourself as smart or dumb. The smart thing to do is stop being on their side and rally and obey God through me. Life is short. I've been saying this for a long time. Why didn't, if I'm wrong, you know, if I'm just, going by feelings, why didn't I sell out by now? Because I'm right. Because this life is better than any life there ever was. Righteousness is greater than wealth. It's greater than conformity. It's greater than being some kind of sorority ass ninny. It's greater than your careers. Being another bootlicker in a corporation with a nice car. Being like, I'm successful in life and I put my college degree to work. Your college degree doesn't mean anything. And your career is an extreme fucking disgrace. Okay, just because there's a bunch of whores, with high heels showing their butts off to pedophiles and their allies and corporations, who encourage you to be a corporate whore, doesn't mean you're successful in life. And you people really need to think about that. You need to stop being, stop letting the fact that you're offended interfere with your understanding of that message. All right, the coming of Zion's king. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly, and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Now, this could be seen as Jesus, okay, who in the New Testament is riding on a donkey, and they're saying, Hosanna. They're saying, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. They're saying things of this nature. I forgot exactly what they're saying. They're saying something like that. They're saying, here's the king. And there's like several thousand people with him, and they want to make him the king officially, and then he flees from there before they can make him the king officially. Okay. Now, what were they referring to? They're referring to the Spirit of God in the king. The king, can be synonymous with the Spirit of God. So they would argue that David, right, is God. They would argue that Jesus is God. That they're anointed by God. They're the gate of God. They can also be referred to as God, but they're not God. It's semantics. Another reason I don't like the Bible, because that failure of semantics is a profound disgrace. Because, man, half the churches ran with it. They go on and on talking about Jesus is God, and they get all argumentative instead of just saying that it's semantics, And some of them, I think, actually believe, or want you to believe that he is God, but he's not. I'm not God. I am the gate of God. To say I'm God is like saying my clothes is me. So if you saw my clothes, you saw my coat sticking through a crack, you say, oh, that's him right there. Okay, that's my coat. So that, it comes with me, but it isn't me. Okay, so we're over here. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim. Okay, I'm behind schedule. I'm going to shoot through this last part. Let's see here. Let me schedule how much time I have left before it doesn't let me upload past that. I'll take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from river to the ends of the earth. As for you, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will free your prisoners from the waterless pit. Return to your fortresses, you prisoners of hope, and I will announce that I will restore twice as much to you. Now, this is part of where it gets confusing. I don't have much time left. Let me just explain this real quickly. See, they're not talking about all Jews. The moral of the story, and keep in mind, it is just a story. It's just a story meant to be applied to real life, to the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. That's why Cush is spelled C-U-Sh, and Abraham, and champion, C-Ham, P-I-On, and Jesus is described as a champion in Psalm 19, and so on and so forth. Okay, because it's just a story. But they're saying, when it comes to a grouping of people that is rolling together, okay, with that's meant to be following me, right? It comes to the most desirable characteristics in people is another way to look at it. It purges those people who are not worthy from the greater spirit of that people. So in the story, it's the Jewish people, and they're purging all the people who aren't. It's not a covenant with all Jews. It's with the part of the Jewish spirit that is meant to be purified, and they spell this out again and again, and to go to heaven. Right? There's no peace for the wicked, and so on and so forth. Jews are getting stoned. If they had a covenant with all Jews and they could do whatever they want, why are Jews getting stoned in the Old Testament? I can go on and on. Anyway, return to your fortress, you prisoners of hope, and I will announce that I will restore twice as much to you. I will bend Judah as I bend my bow and fill it with Ephraim. I will rouse your son Zion against your son's Greece and make you like a warrior's sword. Notice they say, I will rouse you Zion against you son's Greece. They said Greece. Well, who does Greece worship, right? They worship Zeus, who's Baal's Greek equivalent. I'm going to have to finish this in the next video when I do Next chapter.